Good evening, viewers, and welcome to the virtual edition of Healing Through Conversation with me, Saskia. So sorry about the technical glitch that we just had. You know we're streaming virtual, so obviously there'll be a bit of issues here and there. But firstly, happy 2022. So to kick off season 2 in 2022, I've created this segment in the hopes of inspiring those who are challenged with mental health issues and generational blocks during this time, because we all know it's been crazy. It's like, how much healing can one actually do, to be honest? It's just like a whole lifestyle that we end up going with and have to go through and just heal and go to the deeper roots of healing. So this year I do encourage you to challenge your healing and go deeper into it and find out what your triggers are and why it's there. And to help us have that healing conversation, I've invited Shaman Nathan Raaths. So let's put him onto screen right now. Hi, Nathan.
Hello, Saskia. Thank you for inviting me on. I'm looking forward to
Such a
chatting to you.
pleasure. It's always such a pleasure speaking to you. I know, like, we had a Zoom meeting and then we chat via WhatsApp to try and connect, but things happen. So it's such a pleasure having you here to have everyone firstly hear about this conversation and who you are, why you travel this journey. So firstly, what is a shaman is my question for those who don't know.
Well, I mean, firstly, it's an interesting question because I would never call myself a shaman at all. I think it's quite an old term, but I think that we use the term facilitator simply, but essentially, I think it's someone that has been the protectors of certain knowledge for a very long time. I mean, there's always been a medicine man in tribes, and obviously, I'm more into contemporary shamanism. But I mean, our cities, our towns have got so big that we have these huge metropolises without, in some ways, that are disconnected from heart and soul. So there's no doubt that shamanism in its some form, like contemporary shamanism, would come to cities and would grow even in places that are not jungles,
Yes. So you're the co-founder of Wake Circle. So for those who don't know what it is, would you mind giving us a brief introduction of what Wake Circle is and what the objective is for that specific circle?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Wake Circle is based mainly in Southern Africa. And as I said, it's a contemporary shamanic community. And I say community because there's members all over the world, but mainly especially from Zimbabwe down, Southern Africa. And basically what we do is there are multiple healers and facilitators, but essentially we hold or we facilitate a space of initiation. So if I can imagine, if I could give you the image of, have you ever seen that beautiful little statue of everyone with their arms around each other around a flame? The idea would be, we call it holding space. The idea would be, regardless of what medicine you're working with, from breath to sharing to sacred plants, to create an environment where someone feels so safe that they allow whatever comes to the surface to come to the surface, be it a trauma, be it a fear. It's essentially the facilitation of some form of altered state in a very, very safe space. And that's what the community is based on. So there are many medicines in shamanism, and the plants are the one that tend to fascinate people the most.
Interesting. That's firstly got me fascinated because, but we'll go more deeper into that. Because I want to know why plants, what about plants, how does it heal? You know what I mean? That whole journey. It's just, it's interesting to understand that we have this on our planet and we have these medicines around, and it's not Western, which is obviously something that we'll tend to go to as a chemist. But here you might be able to go to your garden, you never know, and you'll have a medicine, right? A medicine plant or something like that. So that's very interesting to know. And I personally would love to travel that journey. This is personally what I believe in. That we've been blessed to have these type of plants available to us or rocks or crystal, whatever it may be. We have these things around us to help us. And so this journey it's very interesting. And I want to know, where did it all start for you? How did you even find this path? What were you before this journey? I know it's a multiple question right there, many layers, but I want to know from the very beginning, where did this all start and why this path particularly?
Okay, I've got you. I mean, essentially, to me, I mean, I'll answer you, but slightly indirectly. We're talking about shamanism. To me,
Yes.
shamanism is essentially, if we look at what we know in modern day, right? Because now we have neurology and we have all these incredible things. And what we do know is that there is a part of our brain where we very much experience ourselves as what we call in modern spirituality our ego, my separate identity. It's a specific area in your brain. And why I'm bringing this up is because it will answer both questions. Because essentially, what we know in shamanism, no matter what area of the world you've gone to, thousands of years back, no matter what you study, whether they were using bouncing or whether they were fasting or whether they were taking certain plants, the one thing that they all had in common was they were slowing down the one area of your brain. And essentially, once that one area of your brain slows down, you lose, or your sense of self dissolves slightly. And therefore, when you're not so obsessed with you separately, you experience the universe completely differently. So, how I got into this was essentially that, well, to be quite honest with you, I was very mentally disturbed and I had some very, very difficult experiences, firstly as a child, waking up very often next to my bed or above my bed, and I was very confused. I was growing up as a Catholic boy, brought up as a Catholic boy, and unfortunately, when I asked for help and guidance, there was no such thing as easy access internet and stuff like that, and it was
Yes.
absolutely terrifying for me. And I had carried so much trauma from that. And on top of that, I remember some silly story that jumps to mind now. Is I remember actually being in primary school and there was a lot of mist, in these cold mornings. And I remember sitting there still really freaked out about the night before, about this experience of once again waking up somewhere in my house out of my body. And I remember
Wow.
watching the children walk past, and the white behind them, I could see the flames and the colors of their auras coming off their backs. So the point I'm trying to make is that it wasn't a happy story. The stuff was with me from a very early age. I accidentally fell through some of these doors. Now I have this beautiful context for it, but it was very, very dark. And personally, I also have a kind of epilepsy. And I've walked
Mm.
right into, if I had to be quite honest, I've walked right into insanity. It has not been pretty. It has not been romantic. And very gradually, I mean, I would go as far as to say I lost most of my 20s to mental illness or whatever it is you want to call it. And I eventually realized that it was
Yes.
kind of like all adversity that we face is the opposite side of it lies the gift that we want to bring into this world. So what I can remember crawling around on my hands and knees in a desperate state. And I said to myself that if I ever find my way out of this, if I ever find a way to actually get out of this mental hell, that I'm going to find other people that are like me because they must be out there. So it's not a pretty story. And eventually I slowly started to find a way to feel grounded, found the answers very,
Ye-
very, through a very difficult route. And gradually just, yeah, as soon as you get your life slightly back, your heart opens and you're like, who else is out there that is experiencing pain and trauma to a level where, well, because I knew how dark it got, and that's basically how I slowly got into it. So part experience and part just the heart space of just feeling such a burning love to be able to possibly be there for someone in such a dark time and confusion,
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes. Wow. It sounds scary. I don't know how you dealt with that from a very young age. It's really overwhelming because obviously to have an out of body experience, many people don't know what that is. Firstly, it's those who know, but it's it's something that is, it's almost quite personal, and it's something that only you know unless you share it and you find someone that can relate to you. Um, and it's just like, obviously, do you think you were misdiagnosed at all from
Yes, I mean,
your perspective, knowing what you know now?
yes, I mean, I honestly think even when they gave me the label of epilepsy, they honestly, I went to neurologists, they just really couldn't explain what it is I was experiencing. And I didn't even share the out of body kind of stuff with them. I was having, for the best way I could explain it to you, is I possibly had what you would call psychotic breaks. So I would not sleep for many, many, many days, and I would go into a heightened state of arousal. And and the worst thing is that basically I would go into months and months and months where I completely lost the plot. This was the original stuff. It was in my early 20s. I got back
Yes.
from living in a forest in Maryland. I was in the most beautiful space. I was lying in bed one night and I had this experience where I literally felt reality shift. And after that, I think 10 years later, possibly started to pull my life back together. I lost a lot of friends. I spent many, many dark nights, literally like pacing through my neighborhood at 2 o'clock in the morning just to keep my brain busy because I thought I was losing my mind, you know.
Yes.
Tried many medications, tried many kinds of doctors, and essentially no one could quite know. They didn't know what to do with me, and I was absolutely terrified. I still have some PTSD, I think, from going into psychosis and losing touch and being so scared at your core, you know.
Yes, I'm pretty sure you would. Not that I've ever been in your situation, but trauma does affect us for years. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's even for generations. So
Yes.
so trauma really does play a huge part in our lives, and it stays for a very long time. I don't think we ever not triggered, but we know how to handle it, I think, or manage it better, right? Um,
Absolutely.
the, yeah, and the question is, my next question is, why plant medicine? Because obviously you mentioned that you tried the Western medicine. Why not just continue? Or how did you know that there's a better alternative than that?
Yeah, I would say that the quick answer, and then I'll build on a little bit, would be out of sheer desperation. Like I was at the point where it was going to be, you know, that I was either going to do myself in eventually. I just didn't have the courage, or I was going to end up becoming a complete addict and die in some gutter. Like trauma and fear and anxiety, and it compounds.
Yeah.
It wasn't really in a powerful space, but the incredible thing about the search for truth, right, and the search for healing is it took me down so many paths, and I became aware of so many different modalities which seem to not be connected in any way. So, like I said, fasting, dancing, drumming, and then we spoke about breathing and plant medicine, and basically began to understand what was it that all of these things were doing at the same time. They all do the same thing. But of course, for me, I felt like I was at the point where something absolutely, like I needed a miracle. I really did, you know. And
Yes.
the experiences that I myself had on plant medicine were so important and profound for me. I mean, most of mine were about literally a fear monster in the beginning, that I had to tackle and I had to have conversations with, and I couldn't even release it because I had to know who I was without this thing. And I just had such a prolific psychological rebuilding and emotional understanding from this. And then I actually asked myself that surely this should have an incredible space for other people, you know. But of course, at that stage, I didn't know how deeply I would end up ingrained in different types of shamanism, and my understanding grew. And now plant medicine is just one of those very powerful tools that we have in our kit that we bring into circles of initiation. But I must say that when it comes to getting through to pretty much anyone, I think plant medicine has probably got to be right up at the top of anybody's list of things that can pull someone from zero to wow in a few days. It's quite magnificent. It doesn't work for everybody. And but yeah, it's about as close to miracles as I have actually seen.
Wow. And what makes these plant medicines so effective?
That is the $1 million question, isn't it? I
Yeah.
think there are multiple facets going on here. And I think, because I mean, the first thing is when someone contacts us, so we have to get an idea of what it is they're dealing with. So
Yeah.
I'm going to very playfully put it in a couple of categories, and there are so many categories. But if you talk about the absolute person who's completely depressed, because we know so much about how the stuff works in your brain. I mean, firstly, don't you find it so interesting that the people that usually want to use plant medicine and stuff because they're battling with emotions and psychological things usually are on medications that cannot mix with ayahuasca. So the first thing you faced with is like, oh goodness, ayahuasca seems to work in a similar area to the brain as those things. So you've almost
But
got to
they can't
challenge
mix.
yourself straight away. Yeah, you've got to be like, well, could I take my medication away long enough to try this? So now let's say you're depressed. The reason why that would work for you, and what I've noticed, is a lot of people are atheists, or they believe that maybe there's nothing else before plant medicine. And if you experience something like ayahuasca for an evening in a very safe setting and you feel very loved and you can explore your shadows and your divinity, most people become extremely open-minded later on. So they experience things like, you know what, there's more to life. Maybe I shouldn't be killing myself in the job. So what I've noticed is for depressed people, it gives them a realization that this is not all there is. We also know that it reconstructs your brain. I mean, I'm not going to get too deeply into it, but like there's something called neural plasticity, where people, to be simplistic, it actually resets the neurons of your brain that you actually start experiencing reality differently. I mean, ayahuasca is
Wow.
one of the most scrutinized substances in the world at the moment, and they are yet to find a dent in it. It's easy to Google it. They've just finished a 10-year research thing of hundreds of people that take it monthly, once a month. And if anything, they
Monthly.
feel that perhaps they are
Wow.
connecting more to areas of their brain. So, yeah.
Wow, that's
So that
incredible.
would be
Firstly, I thought we
depressed
have to go.
people.
Hmm.
No, carry on. I'm listening.
Oh, sorry. No problem. I thought that you'd have to go on like a full-on retreat, of course, and experience it when you feel like. So for someone to take it monthly, because it's obviously, from my research, I've seen that it's so potent that it obviously is life-changing for some people. Um, so taking it once a month seems like a lot to deal with.
Yeah, I don't think it's something that's suggested. I think the reason they picked the people they did in the research study was, well, they needed an extreme version of what was going on. It's kind of like saying, how would you know if a certain substance is banned for you if a person's only done it a few times? So they picked people that are in a line of work, kind of like me. I mean, I know there's actually a study currently in our country that's about to take place about something similar, about ayahuasca. So my point is they took people that are regular ayahuasca drinkers, which is a very rare thing. It either means that they are in some form of shamanism or they are perhaps facilitators of some form. It is rare. And it's just incredible that in that research, they've realized it's definitely not causing any damage, but it would
Wow.
generally be a yearly or a once in a lifetime initiation generally for most people, because essentially we spoke about how it could help somebody depressed, right? But there's so
Yes.
many different types of problems, and that would be anxiety as well. But I mean, on the other hand, the majority of what it is its self-realization. So if I could imagine that you are filled with stories and experiences from childhood, and there's a lot of times we don't even know, and I love that you brought it up at the beginning, what is triggering us. We don't even know. And to sit in this state where your identity, or Nathan. If I am Nathan, I must protect Nathan's point of view, and that's my car.
Yeah.
And it's hard for us to be very insightful in that state and to be in this beautiful environment with ancient sacred music and people you trust that have all prepared so deeply with you, and you allow yourself just to sink there and have this experience. What happens is that little area of your brain, as I said, switches off a little bit, and you start having profound realizations. Now, what we believe is that the plant even talks to you, that it's an ancient guide that's been guiding us for thousands of years. They even give them specific, like ayahuasca is considered a grandmother, and many people paint her. It's fascinating, and many people agree, how it looks. And there are certain characters that often show up in certain medicines to teach, like the snake pitches up on ayahuasca and sometimes has a conversation with everybody in the room. So I think that besides what it does for your brain, and besides the possible reconnections, etc., the spiritual experience itself is absolutely mind-blowing. I think that is primarily, so I don't think it's something people should do all that often, because what very often happens is then you get told or shown certain things that can take you weeks, even months, even years to integrate. And that's where the coaching and the community as a whole and the circles afterwards and the support and stuff is so important. But I mean, if it was true that doing a lot of ayahuasca solved your problems, then, well, that's all that, for instance, someone like myself would have to do, is just keep drinking ayahuasca. There is certain levels of insights and certain levels of absolute expansive, like it's a self-exploration, but there's only so much that you can get from it, and then you have to work with it. I've known for the last 3 years of my life, for instance, I know exactly what's required of me. I just haven't accomplished it yet. So going to drink more ayahuasca is not going to solve that. It gives me the same answer every time. You know what it is you need to do it. So
we always have to do the work, right? We always have to do the work with whatever it is, whatever you're taking to help your mental health. You have to do the work. It's not just like medicine. You can't just take it and expect that you won't be triggered, I think. And that's just from my perspective, and as you're saying as well.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, the best way you could explain ayahuasca, besides everything we've been talking about, the other side is, like, a lot of people in this modern age are battling to tell what their own intuition is, what their higher self is, stuff like that. So that would be the static of thought. So now all these people are preparing. They do a fast and a cleanse, and they all meet at some retreat. And this is an opportunity to, for a few hours, sit and actually communicate with yourself, which is the most fascinating experience. Because most people can even sit there and they'll think of a certain subject that usually they just feel so angry about or so confused about. And the second they think of the subject, all this information of clarity from the spirit of the plant or your higher self, because we don't work in doctrine, whatever you want to perceive. But the point why I'm bringing that up is all the information that's going to come through for you is about what's going on, what the deeper reason for it is, what the cosmic plan is. It doesn't change the fact that it's still going to happen. So, for instance, it might show you why you have a trauma, and that if you build, like with me, if you can heal this trauma, you will be able to guide so many people through their own madness and anxieties and panics. It didn't change the fact that I still the next day had to do those things, and like you said, do the work. It just made me feel 1,000 times better, that I understood it wasn't random, that this pain was something I had chosen. It is something that I had, in my case, I can only speak for myself, planned for thousands of years almost. And just knowing that there's such a perfection to things, and not having to believe somebody in a book or not have to believe a guru, to sit there and without a doubt know for yourself how you got there, what you're doing, what the plan is. There's a little analogy that we use in shamanistic culture. We say that you're in the jungle we're all in the jungle, and it's one mighty adventure. And some of us just give up and stop, and some of us die along the way. And the opportunity of what shamanism gives you, which is many cultures to go to that door, is to climb up the mountain. And eventually you come out the top of the trees and you get to the top of the mountain and you look around and you're like, oh, is that what we're doing? That's what ayahuasca is to me. It's just that hour where you go, oh my goodness, I remember how I got here in the first place. I remember what the plan is. Oh, okay, I've got this. It doesn't change the fact that the following day I'm going to climb back into the jungle. And that maybe even 2 weeks later, I might feel lost. But just having seen for myself what a magnificent plan this is, that I've now got memory of it, makes me treat anxiety differently, depression differently, makes the decisions I'm going to make with my job, with drugs, with everything differently, because, wow, I'm in the middle of quite a grand plan, and it was so nice to glimpse it.
Wow, that's incredible. And just to see your passion, and when you explain it, it's like you're speaking with conviction. That's what I could pick up. So I don't know if everyone else can pick that up, but that's what I'm seeing, is that you know what you're talking about, it seems. And, and I could feel your passion, see your passion, and just, and I'm sure you've had incredible success stories, having the Wake Circle. And I'm sure you had like very, very like incredible success stories. So without obviously mentioning names, I would love for you to share you could either give your top 3 most successful stories, or you could give like one major one that for you was like, life-changing.
Absolutely.
Or a life-changing experience, rather, when you helped someone else.
Absolutely. There's so many things that come to mind. For me, it would always be the people that stick in my heart. I think will always be the people that are, especially if they come to a retreat or something, that are absolutely so terrified, that they are so consumed in their lives by anxiety and thought and illness, and to just see them over a period of a year or 2 or 3, or to just watch how very gradually they change their perception and their ability to take on pain. And because I don't see these people that often, and it's an incredible thing to see a person that's, because this is almost 10 years that we've been working with people, and it's an incredible thing to see someone. It happened to me, I think, a couple of months ago, come through the door that you haven't seen in years, and to just see what a different person that is. But to me, it would be things that you actually see in ceremony, like people willing to accept something, listening to someone release something that has been stuck for so many years, like whether it is sobbing or whether it is laughter or whether it is, I love my partner Heinrich always, we've been teasing each other the other day, but I love his analogy is that we all have a very natural flow between ourselves, the divine, and earth. And he says that we essentially, whenever we're working together with it, we essentially are plumbers. And all we're doing is helping people unblock that flow. And when you see that unblocking first take place, whether it's them experiencing an ecstatic moment with the divine, or whether it's just them crying, or whether it's so beautiful, and then watching. And the most success stories are the ones you actually don't hear from that much until their cousin or their sister or their mother or somebody gets sent on the retreat, and you ask, how have you got here? And they're like, no, my husband or whatever has been telling me for many years that this is something that would really benefit me. But I'm always moved most by people with mental illness, because I myself didn't believe that I would ever find my way back. And I've witnessed many people, come back from things that didn't seem possible. And it's a terrible thing to not feel courageous. It's a terrible thing in your life to feel, I playfully say that we have almost been possessed by our own minds, We've convinced ourselves that the chattering that goes in our heads is who we really are. And if you watch a lady or a gentleman sit in a room, even if you've used something else, but we were talking specifically about ayahuasca, and you watch when the thoughts quiet down and they actually find or experience themselves for the first time, it's absolutely life-changing. It's like they come out, your entire belief system shifts. And of course, trauma is something I'm very passionate about, and something sometimes people are scared for weeks before a retreat because they believe they're going to have to face or relive that trauma in some way, which is not really the case. But it's still very scary to go into a space wondering what it is you're going to experience, and to watch
Yeah.
people when they get to that point where they start to feel certain things that they usually would avoid. The idea is that a wake circle is built in a way, if you can imagine a group of people holding hands. And if I can turn this on you, Saskia, imagine you have an anxiety or a fear that you didn't even know you were avoiding your whole life. Or it might be a trauma that as soon as you start feeling and it comes to the surface, you're unsafe and you go run off to do that and that. And I want you to imagine a group of people holding hands or sitting in a circle that you feel so safe that whether you're dancing or whether you're singing or whether you're breathing with us, and we've prepared you. And when that feeling starts to come, whether you're moaning or nervous or rocking, that you feel so safe that you just allow the wake circle to hold you and see whatever it is that's going to happen if this thing you've been avoiding your whole life comes to the surface. And of course, nothing bad ever happens. Usually they're like, and they through and they're like, oh. And that's how trauma is. If you've watched a buck run around the corner after a lion has hunted them, as soon as they know that they're okay, they can let it go. And human beings can't do that. And what happens in complex trauma, which is from childhood, is that we essentially have interrupted the process of letting go of that fear. So what happens is 10, 20 years later, you in some primal areas of your brain are still waiting for this thing to happen. And when it rises, maybe it's like feeling very insecure, or maybe it's an anxiety attack, and you thinking there's always a secret belief in the background, I'm going to die or I'm going to go crazy. And we will mess our entire lives up avoiding that unconscious fear, like intimacy, or what if someone hurts me? What if I have a panic attack and die? And can you imagine making a choice? Am I going to let the rest of my life disappear? Or am I going to find an environment where we can bring that to the surface? And of course, we shake it a bit. I mean, the room, the environment, it starts to come to the surface. And every single time that person realizes that it was unconscious and that it's safe and nothing bad ever happens. But I tell you, you got to feel very safe. Imagine you are having an anxiety attack and it's getting stronger and stronger. And would you run? Well, usually we would. But what if we're in an environment where the wake circle is a process of initiation to help you to face a trauma of some kind? And as I said, imagine just as you're about to run or give up, boom, there's just silence. And for the first time, you've proven to your mind or your inner child, it's going to be okay. And after that, they deal with that rising thought or feeling so differently. And some days it's not about trauma.
It sounds so incredible. Just that feeling of, while you were describing that feeling, it took me back to the moment where my grandpa told me that I have certain gifts that has been passed down from his brother. And at that moment, I know this is probably like a very bland version compared to the experiences you have, but for me, it felt like everything lifted off of my shoulders, because at that moment I was challenged with, so I was a singer from a very young age. I was like 4 years old, and I grew up in the arts. So I was born like, I came up like, so that was just my life. But then something happened where I was probably around my early 20s, and something shifted. So music went away, arts went away, all these things that I'm so used to, and how comical and theatrical my life was, it all went into like this serious work type of lifestyle. I don't know, when I say work, I mean like 9 to 5, entrepreneurship. You know, it to me it was, I felt like I lost myself just a bit going into entrepreneurship, to be honest, because of the fact that there are set rules and there's ways of doing things, and there's a certain type of businesswoman that you might have to be. And, you know, and there's a certain way that you have to conduct yourself, where I started to push myself into that. And I just felt like I was losing the true essence of me, which is the bouncy, the friendly, the happy, the guys, I trust you, just go ahead and do it. Do you know what I mean? That type of loose type of personality. Sounds wrong, but you know what I mean. So like that personality, I just always had that, and I felt that I lost a bit of my smile and a bit of my spark, and you know, things like that. And I just needed something to get me back to it, where I can become brave enough to be who I truly am, and not the one that's in a box, you know, this businesswoman. Because I'm more than that, you know. I'm personality, I am music, I am theater. I'm still that person. So I'm soul, I'm still that person. And I just felt like at that moment it was a breaking point for me, and I needed answers. And I remember having a conversation with my grandfather, and he said, and I was like, why can I sing? Why can I do all these things and it's going nowhere? Why do I have those abilities? And why am I in business? Why do I do these things? You know? And one of the things that he mentioned was also finding my spiritual gifts as well. So it's like, why are my spiritual gifts different to others? You know, that's what I was looking at as well. And spiritual gifts, meaning visions, dreams, and you know, having those type of abilities, which I tend to have and had all my life. I tried to dumb it down a lot, but because I couldn't really relate to others until I started just being myself, and those people were attracted to me, and I could have those type of conversations. But I just needed those type of answers. I needed an answer to why is it that I am the way I am, and why is it that I do things the way I do things, you know? And one thing that he mentioned is that I just needed some sense of purpose, if that makes sense. And he mentioned that his brother was very intuitive, very spiritual, and my mom was pregnant with me, and I was inside her, and just before I was born, his brother passed away. But I think it was the night before he passed away, he touched my mom's tummy and said that all your kid or your child will have all my gifts, and he could sing too, and all those things. So all my abilities, I'm passing it down to her. And when my grandpa's never told me that before, but when he told me, I don't know what happened, something inside of me dropped the phone. I cried and started to laugh on the floor, and I just began to laugh and laugh, and I was like, yes, 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 I know who I am, you know. And the thing is that it's not a clear answer. I think it's a feeling.
Yeah.
To me, it's not this is who you are. To me, it was like almost like a remembrance, or I don't know, something in me just clicked, where I was unleashed.
Yeah, exactly that. What I was going to say is about what you're saying. I mean, we're using you as a very powerful example here. Is I would go as far as to say, no matter who's listening to, you know, this, or who listens to this down the line,
Yes.
whether they feel they're slightly ill, or whether they're just slightly unhappy, or whether it's really bad, I would say that the thing that every human being I've ever worked with has in common is that at the primary core of where the problem is, it's purpose. It's that simple. And I'll give it to you in this way, right? So the reason you did that and collapsed is because you had that experience where you had purpose like you were suddenly had purpose. Our pain doesn't seem to, I mean, if I tell you, for instance, I'm going to put a ball inside the sky, you have absolutely no idea to know if that ball is small or if it's big unless I put another ball next to it. So in other words, we have nothing that can give it any, and pain is a lot like that, and emotions are a lot like that. We all wonder why it is we're feeling and what is it compared to other people. And so what this has to do with purpose is that if you imagine like some child in a race, if he knows he's got to get to the end of the race and that was why he's there, if he's cramping and if he's got a pain in his back, he's got a very clear idea of what he needs to do. And you cannot
Yes.
believe the amount of pain a human being can endure if they know why they're enduring it. And I think the great difficulty of our age is we are kind of like the generation that has forgotten why we're here. So purpose, whether
Yes.
somebody is sitting at home and they are right now doing their washing, or they are terrified about going back to a job that's boring them, the problem is not usually what someone is experiencing. It's that they're not sure why they should endure it. If someone, for instance, decides, similar to what you're doing, that this is a purpose of my life and I want to do this, and they get a glimpse to go up onto that mountain, that proverbial mountain, and to see how this all fits together in the greater scheme, what an incredible thing is, our spiritual tenacity increases to such a point where maybe now that bipolar disorder or whatever your thing is, that complex seizures, or maybe you have big insecurities, or maybe you have a physical deformation, or whatever it is, if you can put it into a context of purpose, well, then you will not believe what people can endure. I mean, if you think about people, for instance, that have become paraplegics and things like that, the ones that, I mean, it must be difficult no matter what, right? But if you think about the
Yes.
ones that have written books and changed, the only thing they've really done, because I promise you, they still experience pain and discomfort. But the major difference between those people is that when they look at their adversity, they have built a purpose into that. And the $1 million question would be, is purpose given to you before you arrive? Or is it something you decide on later? And I honestly think it's both, because I now remember having a plan, but I also had to seize that plan. What did all this fear and what did all this anxiety and trauma, what could the positivity of bringing it into the world is? So you experienced finding purpose. I would say, if you were to ask me in one sentence, why do people come to your retreats? I'd say because people don't know what their purpose is, and they're trying to find it in some. That's the number one thing.
At the end of the day, as you said, that is what we're looking for. We're looking to feel significant, or to allow others to be significant in our lives as well, to feel that way. And I think the most, like, purpose is, from what I can tell, purpose is linked to significance, right? In some sort of way. And yeah, so purpose is everything. I mean, what's the point of being here if you don't know why you're here and what you're supposed to do? Where do you
Absolutely.
go?
And
What do you do?
I think another mistake people make, because purpose is to me one of the biggest subjects in the world that everyone avoids. It's like a taboo, even in spiritual society, is
Yes.
purpose. Like, a lot of people have this divine experience, they'll glimpse God or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't necessarily mean that then they only dedicate themselves to things like that. I've seen a lot of people go into ceremony and literally experience, just for a few hours, how enormous the universe is, and dedicate the rest of their lives to their husband or to their family. It's like sometimes, in seeing how magnificent the plan is, we're able to actually commit to the lives that are right in front of us. Not always. Some people go, you know what, this job is stupid, and they go and they completely change their lives. But a large portion of people just want to know that there's more, that they don't have to be restless and make stupid decisions, and
Yes.
because they're worried about their impending death. We have been dying since the beginning of time, And shamanism has existed right from the beginning. And that doorway that exists, no matter how they got you there, was just as the old, and many writers have said, that to be alive is to first experience your death long before it comes upon you. And that's what shamanism is. Come and sit with me in a completely safe space. I'm saying not me, I'm saying this would be the ancient story where you feel
Yes.
completely safe. And just for a few hours, we will open the door. Some people call it the death's door, some people call it the birth's door. It's the same door. And you will actually have an opportunity to realize while you're in that state, ask questions, realize there's so much more to this. You won't be able to understand it. You won't be able to explain the universe. You won't be able to write a book tomorrow. And you said this earlier. It's a knowing, though. It's like there's a knowing in you. You're like, oh, okay. And some people recommit. They actually are able to take their lives and go, you know what? Loving someone is one of the most profound things you could ever do. Showing up in someone's life is the most profound thing you could do. So it does not
Yeah.
mean that people that drink ayahuasca suddenly get gold teeth and dreadlocks and a combi and run away. It's not true. A lot of these people are businessmen or high powered individuals that might decide to ethically practice business slightly differently. But the majority of people that I know that have had a quite a powerful divine experience, they tend to recommit even deeper in authenticity to the lives that is in front of them.
Wow. Wow. Wow, that's incredible. So, with all these amazing experiences, I do need to ask. I think you mentioned it. Yeah, you did. You mentioned it in the very beginning, which is it doesn't work for everyone.
Yes.
Why not? How does it not work for everyone? Yeah, that's what I would like to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first answer is going to be that nothing will work for you when you're not ready. I mean, when is enough enough, right? I mean, an addiction is an example, right? Like nothing cures addiction. I mean, there are things
Yeah.
that can certainly help with it. Ayahuasca being one of the most famous in the world at the moment. But like, if you're not ready to let something go, if you don't know who you are without that thing, or if you just really actually like that thing, even though it's causing a lot of trouble, there's nothing that can help you. But I think the people that are, so for the most part, I think that it actually stuns people or surprises them just how much or what it can bring to the table. The people it doesn't help, I would say, are, first of all, if you're not ready, I would say that if you have quite severe psychological problems, I don't think ayahuasca would be the good place to start. It wouldn't be a,
Okay.
shamanism itself would be, because just to experience an altered state, which can even be done, as I said, through music and through breath, is a beautiful thing.
Yes.
So I think and also there does seem to be certain belief systems that are a little bit more uncomfortable with going into an altered state. So it really depends on the person. The first thing we do when someone contacts us is we have a discussion with them about what they're dealing with. And for instance, if what they're dealing with is something that we think what we're doing could exacerbate or not help, we would tell them. And we allow them to go to whoever in our community is working with that specific thing. So, but I certainly, I mean, ayahuasca is one of the bigger experiences spiritually you can have. And I don't think I don't think it is completely for everyone, but I also can't say you've got to be ready, because some of my most amazing stories in ayahuasca are people that, the two types of people that do ayahuasca usually are the ones that are so connected spiritually and they just willing to take anything on. They're like, bring it. And then there's another
Yes.
type, like right on the other side of the spectrum, are they desperate? They've tried absolutely everything. So, like, I also think it's not true that you've so got to be ready for ayahuasca, because I think it's going to give you exactly what you need. I think of a gentleman many, many years ago who didn't say a word the whole ceremony. He had quite a difficult ceremony because he groaned and he needed a bit of assistance. And but when he eventually shared, he basically said, "Look, I was going to shoot myself on Tuesday. I just thought, there's one thing I always wanted to do, And I may as well, I mean, I may as well not be scared of it because I'm going to be dead on Tuesday. You see, he had the gun out on the table. And he was just literally, so my point is he was in a terrible space. And ayahuasca basically made an agreement with him saying, look, I can't get you to not kill yourself. And this is how this whole story went. But I can get you to not do it for a while because there's a couple of things that we need to do. And this is how this conversation started, which is still continuing years later. So I think the point is simply, and also very recently, we've had people that have lost people, which is devastating. We recently had an incredibly beautiful experience where in a small group, when we were all together, not knowing who was going to come, and just there were 6 or 7 of us, as the ceremony started, we realized that all of us had one thing in common. We had just lost someone. And then we made the wake circle, which essentially is a portal, to allow us to all hold, not one special person, all hold that special space and call for divinity to show up in some way. And would you believe it? And it's an uncommon thing. Nearly every single person in the room sat and had a conversation with their parent or whoever had just passed. So the amount of crying that went down in this room was extraordinary. But I can't necessarily tell you that ayahuasca specifically is for that. That was the intention. That was what was needed. And what a beautiful thing to get to do that, to get closure. So I think purpose and death are always the most fascinating things right at the core of this, How different would you behave if you knew that this was just a chapter and you didn't know because you had to have faith? You could literally look for yourself, which is I would say, as we said, it can be a curse, but I think it's the gift that anybody who's had an experience like I have, where you keep leaving your body. I, as a child, didn't have a belief system about the fact that I wasn't my body. I just knew, it's not, death is a little bit different when you've stood and looked down at yourself snoring. It's like, and you've got feelings and you've got emotions. And so, I mean, that I think started the fascination so early on for that, essentially. Wow. It's such a huge subject. It can go on for...
It really is. I'm literally getting lost in what you're saying. My thoughts are rushing. And obviously, for the purpose of the show, I'm definitely making sure that I stay on track so that it remains clear. But you are making me think. You're really making me think, Nathan. And I think that's the point of the show. That for me is the purpose, is that we plant these seeds to have us, think a bit more, think a bit deeper, is to find out what we really need in order to heal. You will know the answer. If this resonates with you, I mean, I would suggest go to Wake Circle if this resonates with you and you obviously completely shook like I am right now. I just love it so much. So can we conduct our own healing sessions or not? Or is it advised that it has to go through you or the Wake Circle? Or do we have the ability to self-heal with these medicines, or with not just with ayahuasca, but I'm not too sure if you specialize in all of them or just ayahuasca, but can we self-heal with the plants that we can find in the garden or at home, or do we have that ability, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's an amazing question. I think the simple answer is yes. And an example of that is, I mean, all things can be treated as sacraments, right? Like an example is tobacco is one of the original shamanic medicines, which is used in multiple ways, but then we got hold of it. And thousands of years later, we've processed it and come up with this idea where we smoke it regularly. It was originally a medicine of protection, and even if you smoked it, it was like so my point is that all things can be abused. But if you look at marijuana itself, even marijuana is an example of a shamanic medicine that is used extensively by people. It's the only thing I take for my epilepsy. I take a little bit of oil extracted from a marijuana plant every day.
Yes.
So I'm not promoting marijuana. I'm just giving it an example. That is one of the big shamanic plants. a lot of people in their lives have learned to chill out from marijuana. A lot of people have learned, but I said the other thing I said, because yes, people can also abuse it and they can cause psychosis from it. But there's an example, and I mean, many people had their awakening through magic mushrooms, what they call magic mushrooms, psilocybin. They were at a party or something, and unfortunately, in the most cases, these are pretty reckless situations. And the best example I would give you is that if something difficult or profound started to come up for you, that's absolutely fine if it stays like within a realm of where you're comfortable. But unfortunately, when you start to alter the mind just a little bit, it's just the most extraordinary thing to have a setting where you know that you're really safe. So I would say people can use many different plants. There are specific plants, though, that unfortunately should not ever be attempted on your own. And I think ayahuasca would probably be, most people in the world would agree with me, ayahuasca and iboga would probably be right at the top of the list. Not just because there's preparation, it would be not just because you sometimes need assistance, you need to feel safe. It's kind of like if you can imagine, I said to you, okay, I'm going to push in this little area of the back of your head, and I'm just giving you a playful example, and you're going to start, whatever makes you feel really uncomfortable is going to start rising to the surface. When that thing rises to the surface, you want to proverbially fall back into the safe arms of people who know what's going on, not to then be like, oh, can I handle this? Can I, So yeah, I think there are definitely some plants that people can explore with on their own or with a friend. I always suggest a really good setting, the right music, not to have any anxiety or pressure, because that can really interfere with an altered state journey. And there are so many plants, it's not hard to go and investigate what. But definitely there are certain ones, as I said, that I wouldn't suggest that you attempt it on your own, specifically not the first few years.
Yes, I think that definitely makes sense. I would firstly feel safe with a professional, knowing exactly what it is, why we're doing it, and to make sure that I'm calm. So it does make sense, because self-healing at home, like you said, I mean, we can tend to abuse it, like marijuana, tobacco, magic mushrooms, which you just mentioned, as well, is that it can be abused. And I think naturally ego tends to allow us to abuse it, right? And we can't always get a hold of our ego. So I think someone else to guide us would be great. The point that shocked me is that tobacco, that is wild. It's a shamanic medicine that was originally used. Like, that is crazy to me, because everyone's using it.
Yeah,
Everyone's smoking a cigarette.
absolutely. But I mean,
And it's
even the
actually a plant
fermentation
that
of
heals.
alcohol, right? Even alcohol, the original fermentation of alcohol has quite a ceremonious thing to it. It was like
Okay.
fermentation and part of the culture. And I mean, nowadays, if you look at like those fermentating kind of things thousands of years ago, opposed to these steel distilleries with this 100 proof vodka in it, like, we have literally ripped the soul right out of things. Um,
Wow.
I mean, look at, I mean, cacao leaves. Cacao is an absolute medicine. It's one of the ancient medicines, and I mean, we've taken cocoa and cacao and come up with cocaine, and you get what I mean. So we've kind of ripped
Yes.
the soul out of a lot of these things, and only us in our modern time can decide how it is that we can create a balanced relationship with those things. Who's to say what but I think only you can know if you're abusing something. But I think that the best thing would be to just understand that each plant has a message for you. And when you get the message, you've got to integrate the message. And going back for the same message all the time is not necessarily going to help you. But to explore healing on your own is a magnificent thing. But it's a something anthropologists talk about now, that if you imagine back thousands of years ago, when you closed your eyes to figure out what was inside there, not trying to sleep, so the first spirituality, you could only do it for short periods because there were
Yes.
predators and things. And we now know that we are hardwired. Wake circle, wake is death, wake is alive. we know we are hardwired to actually allow ourselves to fall into deeper states when there's other people on watch. Does it make sense? Like, think of the first spirituality, like someone was like drumming and you had
Yes.
your friends around and you're sitting there, and usually if you started feeling strange, you'd stand up and look for the threat or the tiger. Or now what would happen is the others would keep watch and they'd make the noise and you would go so deep, and then you would come out with a story. And then, so do you feel how being around others, if it's the correct tribe for you, and being prepared and facilitated, actually is genetically hardwired, that you can actually allow yourself to be more courageous, to face more, to go
Yes.
deeper, etc. You know, so there's a space, I think, for daily self-exploration. But if there's something you've been avoiding to surmise, something you're battling to feel, or a place you can't go because like a trauma keeps pulling you out, there is a possibility to be around a group of people that can facilitate you to find your way into that space to see what's there.
Incredible. I've had such an amazing time with you. It's just my head is all over the place with what you're saying, and I love it. I love going deep into healing. I love getting to the root of it. So thank you so much for being here. And I want to ask you one last question. And this question is for everyone out there. And it is, do you have a message of encouragement for those who are challenged with mental health experiences, and for people who are facing trauma on their own, and for those who obviously, the people that are actually deciding, is this for me or is this not? And you obviously mentioned why they should get involved, and you gave us the cons and the pros of this journey. And so yeah, to go back, I would need to know, do you have a message of encouragement?
I've got you. Sure, that's a powerful question to ask at the end. I think that for myself, when you ask me, is it for everyone? Like, a lot of the work that my partner and myself and even other people in our organization do is actually verbal and is one-on-one, is not always with plants. And the reason I'm bringing that up is why my words of encouragement would be that what I've noticed with most people is that they don't actually realize that what they are feeling, like whether it is a trauma or an anxiety in their solar plexus, they don't actually realize they're experiencing a trauma. They don't actually realize how badly they're suffering, and they don't realize that it's fixable. And the problem is, if you've been losing a war for many, many years, like me, 10 years of just walking into the same, you keep making terrible decisions, you keep responding immediately, trying to survive, and therefore, and quite honestly, you eventually start thinking that it says something about you as a person, maybe through addictions, or maybe through terrible decisions, or maybe not being able to meet people intimately, or maybe like eventually not answering your phone. And because of these things tend to grow, And I think my message to people would be that there really is a way out. I mean, if I found a way to become part of society again, it's possible. But the only way is to reach out and to ask for help, which is very hard for a lot of people with trauma, because they like to believe that usually the people that have quite a lot of trauma are people that have been brought up in an environment where they're like, oh no, I'm not traumatized, I'm fine, there was nothing wrong with me. So they tend to be quite strong, and they don't want to admit that maybe I actually started as a really soft, gentle person, and some of these things are still sitting with me. And trauma starts to really visit you later on in life. And mine started to come back really, really strong. And I think that you're not alone, and that I know how dark it gets. And there are many very prolific people that are able to manage it, mental illness, and actually live extraordinary lives. But until you're sitting with someone, and I can think of many people that can do what I do as well, who really know how dark it can get and can speak that language and the steps, and it can be quite difficult. So I would say reach out. And that try and communicate with the people that are close to you, because they know something's going on, and they would love you to just try and bring them in so they can figure out a way to best support you.
Yes. And could they, thank you for that. Thank you for saying that you're not alone. That's what many people need to understand, is that you're really not. And it's not, I know many people say it, but many few actually mean it, and in this situation, it is something that, Nathan, I think you really do mean, and from myself as well, you really are not alone. And there are people around, and this show has been created to obviously bring that to light, to show who you can lean on and the support systems that are around us everywhere. They're literally everywhere. We just have to find them, right, and get connected. So guys, please feel free to chat to the Wake Circle. Send them you guys are on Instagram and Facebook. I researched, you've got a website, and the website is www.wakecircle.com or .co.za.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I remembered. Yay. So, visit
Thank you,
the site.
Saskia.
Send
Thank you
them
for
an
the evening.
email. Nathan, it is such a pleasure having you. And I hope to follow your journey, and I hope to see you soon in person, physically. So really hope to do that. And thank you for tuning in, guys. I hope you had a wonderful enjoyed this conversation, rather. You enjoyed this conversation with us. Until next time, have a lovely evening. Thank you, Nathan. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Ciao.